I feel like this might be a good place to pause and move on to some personal highlights. I want to ask you, Ben. You know, right now we had some fun here at the beginning, but let's get serious. What are some
that?
What are some personal highlights you've had from this series so far?
It's kind of interesting because my experience with the series is pretty different from just about anyone else's.
Yeah, definitely.
Skip and I first started talking about possibly doing a spiritual discipline series back in March or April or something like that. We decided we were going to do it in the fall around May and starting in June, and that's where we kind of outlined, what we were going to do with the retreat and the devotional and the life report and all of these different tie-ins. So I knew I was going to be writing the devotional, so starting around June, I actually started doing pretty intensive research into spiritual disciplines. Started writing in July, finished writing in August, planned the retreat. So I've really been doing this series for about 6 months almost.
Wow.
So it's a little bit weird to actually feel it come to a close. At the same time, I feel like I almost experienced the bulk of the series before anyone else did. Like writing, I haven't been going through the devotional now because I went through it, wrote it this summer, so that was kind of my experience with it. But as far as personal highlights from the series, definitely enjoyed writing the devotional. That was a lot of fun. And the retreat a couple weeks ago was an absolute blast. And I think those two really stand out as the big highlights for me.
Yeah.
How about you?
Well, for me, I think maybe the biggest thing that I gained from it, because I've went over the spiritual disciplines a lot, both in school and just in personal study. But for some reason, this time, stewardship really stuck out to me. And it wasn't just about that I should increase my giving monetarily, but the idea that everything God's given us is a blessing that we're supposed to use to further His kingdom. Not just money, but even our time, our possessions, everything. And it made me really rethink, what am I spending my money on? And do I need to buy McDonald's for the third day in a row, or should I be saving this money so I can use it for something for the kingdom?
And you're actually not having any fast food right now.
I know, and actually it did stem from that in a sense.
Yes.
As part, I'm on like day 15 of no fast food, which is remarkable for me.
How's that going?
Fine, it's going great because I know that my focus is on one. I'm trying to. It's kind of for health and money saving, but the reason I'm saving the money is so that I'm being a wise steward of what God has given me. And then when it comes to time, just thinking about, like, I dropped some TV shows that I like to watch. Okay, I mean, they weren't necessarily my favorite shows, but I watched them weekly, and I dropped those because I know that there's better things I can do with my time than wasting it on television.
Especially now that Lost is over.
I know.
Now,
I mean,
a whole new life.
I would have never given up Lost for God, unfortunately.
But you are a hardcore Lost fan.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and so that actually, joking aside, kind of gave you some space in your life that you didn't have before.
It did.
Yes.
So I guess of all the weeks, I mean, I got a lot out of some of the different things that we went over, but of all the weeks, stewardship really affected me. I mean, still, right now, I'm in this mode of really thinking about what am I doing with what God's given me.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think stewardship is one of those that doesn't really stand out as being a spiritual discipline when you first think about it. And so, like, for me, when we were talking about what different disciplines to have in there, stewardship was one of those where, I was kind of wondering, is that really going to be effective to people, or is it just going to be confusing? Like, why is stewardship a discipline? So it's good to hear that that was good. Yes, so Matt, Duchess of Crust shared her favorite discipline from the series. Yes. What's yours?
Okay, favorite discipline from the series.
I know you talked about stewardship as being the one that benefited you most, but I'm asking you your favorite one.
In general, my favorite spiritual discipline tends to be reading the Bible, because when it comes to how I hear from God the most, that's where He speaks to me. I hear from God through my personal study of the Word and also through messages about His Word. So sermons, Bible reading, those are where I hear from God. So thus, my favorite. Ben?
I am a big fan of silence and solitude.
There it is.
Yes.
Which is weird because you talk so much. So... Yeah.
But I'm actually, I love doing the life report, but I'm a super introverted person, and I love to process stuff, and so I really benefit from silence and solitude a lot, and that kind of combined with journaling are good for me. Now,
Wait, I want to say about Silence and Solitude. I went in the summer, as we talked about a lot already. I'm feeling motivated to go again. The only problem is the place I went last time doesn't have electricity, which means the longer I wait, the colder it's going to get, and the less comfortable I'm going to be. I don't think I'll go this weekend, but maybe I will. But no, I won't. So yeah, like I said, never done it before this year.
I think they have heat there, don't they?
They have like lanterns with fire.
I thought they had a heater.
I could be wrong, but I was gonna say, even though this is the first year I did it and I'm new to it, I really gained a lot from it. Also, not necessarily during the series, but as a spiritual discipline this year, it was a new one that stuck out to me.
Yeah, I think the worst part in the winter would actually be using their outhouses.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even think of that.
Terrible.
Yeah, I'm totally not going until next year.
No, we'll see you in the spring watching the terrace.
Exactly. Thank you.
So, favorite discipline. How about what one is the most effective in your life?
Oh, in my life? All right.
Or is it the same answer?
Let me think about this. Let's just say them out loud together. Bible reading, prayer, journaling.
Silence and solitude.
Silence and solitude. Stewardship.
Worship.
Oh, yeah. Worship.
Stewardship.
Stewardship.
Service. Fasting.
Okay, well, definitely not fasting. but that
one might be miserable, but it might be effective for you.
No, not effective. It makes me so angry. Effective? Stewardship, right now it's heavy on my mind because it's really making me reprioritize my whole life. And so when it comes to sacrifice and my relationship with God, and I mean, that discipline has been very effective. And just in the sense of thinking about what am I doing with these things, everything that God's given me, my relationships, possessions, time, money. That's something that's really heavy on my mind right now. Maybe next year I won't even care about it.
Yeah. Can only do that stewardship thing so much.
Well, once I give it all away, I'm kind of left with nothing.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about it. I think this is
you have to
literally
be a good steward with your cardboard box after you give everything else away.
I feel like this is a life-changing point of my life. I think I'm rethinking.
Well, that's good.
I think it's
because the sermon series was called Transformation.
Oh my gosh,
Discipline. You've been transformed by discipline.
I feel it.
Wow.
How about you?
Right now, I'm really benefiting from scripture and study and all of that. And I think maybe it's just being in school and really enjoying that and just really learning and diving into scripture has been good lately. We did our favorite. We did our effective. Oh, yeah. And then I'm going to ask you, what do you think is the most essential of the disciplines that we have covered?
Oh, man, this is tough. I mean, everybody always talks about Bible and prayer, so it feels like those are the most essential. I'm going to say prayer. And here's my reason. Because everything is based on relationships when it comes to loving God and loving others. So we have to have a relationship with God to love Him. We have to have a relationship with others to love them. So how do we build the relationship? Of course, reading the Bible helps us learn about God, but there has to be communication with God. So if I had to pick just one, I'd say prayer is the most essential.
Yes. And it's tough to argue with that. I'm going to go in a slightly different direction. Okay. Not to say it's better than prayer, but for our culture and how busy we are and how crazy lives we live, I think that silence and solitude is in many ways the most essential discipline for American Christians because we don't live quiet lives. We live extremely crazy lives. And to be able to intentionally make space in your life is going to be extremely transformative. I don't think it's an optional discipline. Not everybody's going to want to do Pacham and Terrace or whatever, and that's fine. But just to take, 10, 15 minutes a day in silence and solitude is so countercultural, and it will absolutely change your life if you do it. So I really see that as, in a lot of ways, being one of the most, if not the most essential discipline.
I'm going to debunk you.
Go for it.
I think what you said is, I agree with everything you said, except for, is it the most essential?
Well, again, prayer is... You're right. Prayer and the Bible are kind of the foundational.
But the reason I say it might not be... Okay,
I just didn't want to repeat you.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think it's good. I'm not saying it's not good, but I mean, myself, I'm sure there's other listeners that have not had a lot of experience with silence and solitude. Yes. And yet we have a long-term relationship with God. So I'm not saying it's not good. It's definitely good. And what you said, I'd encourage everybody to do it. But essential... Could you not have a relationship with Jesus unless you do it? Tough to say.
I don't think I would say that, but I would say that your relationship with God will be stunted unless you are making space in your life.
I can see that because we all go through plateau times where it feels like,
Yep.
man, I'm just doing the same old thing. What maybe that could lead to breakthrough.
I think it's also, though, even more so, it's really about the whole don't conform to the patterns of this world rather than be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't ever make space for silence and solitude in your life, and you're living in our culture, you are conforming to the patterns of this world. You are being sucked in by the world in an unhealthy way.
Totally agree.
And by culture and all of that. And, you know, we talk about culture and the negative effects of that a lot as evangelicals, but we don't focus on that part very much. That it's not just about the bad stuff, it's also just about the pace of life.
Well, yeah, and I hope that people do hear what you're saying and are encouraged, if they never have, to...
Yeah, or guilt trip. I'd go for either one.
Just give it a chance.
Yes.
15 minutes, you said? That's good. I think there is something about going a little longer, because anybody can sit quietly for 10, 15 minutes.
Really?
Yeah.
You haven't met some of the people I've met, then.
But I'd like to see people, if they're really going to do it, try for an hour.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Choose an afternoon where you've got some time and blow off work. No, do a Saturday afternoon and just take an hour or two.
Next week, we have a show based on a question from the famed Flamingo.
Well, it's actually based on a couple of people's questions.
Really?
Because the Flamingo wasn't the only one to ask about this.
So, it's interesting. I think our tithing conversation, that I believe was on your birthday,
yes,
really sparked something in our community.
Well, it's interesting because if you haven't heard the service episode or the stewardship episode, stewardship episode, you should go back and listen to it because we had a really interesting discussion about tithing.
Yeah.
Whether or not the concept of the tithe still applies.
Because Ben and I had a disagreement about it.
Yes. I think we basically mostly agree right now.
Yeah.
But a lot of people have had questions about it, in part because the next week in church, Skip had read a verse from Matthew 18, I believe.
Where Jesus specifically says something about the tithe.
Yes, and he's talking to the Pharisees, and he tells them, you guys tithe, all of this stuff.
And you should do that.
You should do that, but you also should not neglect these other parts of the law. So is Jesus confirming the tithe? I mean, he seems like he's saying it's a good thing and that they should do it, so how does that all work?
So, to find out the answer, come back next week when the Life Report tackles tithing.
Again, actually, we're going to expand it even bigger than that. Because I think it's part of a bigger question. It's about what is the relationship between Christians and the Old Testament law. And I think that that's a really confusing thing for a lot of us. Mm-hmm. And most of what I've heard about it is not helpful.
You and I have had a lot of conversations about this, so I'll be really excited to talk about this with everybody.
And I've actually been doing a lot of just individual research on this over the last few months, so prepare to be bored by my research.
So if anybody has any questions, not just about the tithe, but about how the law ties in with our new covenant, or how the old covenant now ties in with what we know as the new covenant.
Yep.
Does the law of Moses still apply to us as Christians today?
Yep.
When you're reading the first 5 books that Moses wrote, and there's the Pentateuch, and there's all these rules.
Yeah.
Does the law apply to Christians today?
Yes.
Find out next week on the Life Report.
We're going to get into N.T. Wright, who I'm a big fan of, and some of his stuff on there. So it'll be really interesting.
Do you have a preview for next
for 2 weeks from now? We are going to cover taking Scripture out of context.
Oh, very
and good. When is it appropriate, if ever?
I don't know if it's ever appropriate.
Right, but we do it all the time. And how does context work with reading our Bibles? Is it appropriate to just read one verse and say, this is that, and go with that? And how does that work? And what is the appropriate use of Scripture?
I think it's interesting when a pastor is or anybody is trying to make a specific point, and so they will check all the different translations to see what sounds the most like what they want to say.
Yes.
So maybe
if nothing else, make your own translation, Eugene Peterson.
So, will we have a chance to maybe talk about translations as well during
Definitely.
that? All right, well,
actually, translations are something that I have a pretty big opinion about.
Oh my gosh. This is going to be great. The next 2 weeks sound really good. And
we will have a guest host.
Should we tell who it is, or is it a surprise?
We can tell who it is.
Go ahead.
Sarah Ite.
Hey, Sarah.
From My Life Group is going to be, who actually requested this topic, so she'll be here with us in 2 weeks to discuss it.
Well, this is going to be great. Next week, Tithing Revisited. 2 weeks, taking Scripture out of context.
And after that, the battle for Christmas.
Yes. I'm super excited about the rest of this year. I guess for now, that's all from here. I'm Matt Anderson.
I'm Ben DiBono.
And we are signing off.
Signing off.